we wanted to understand the meaning of life, right? But there must be more to life. So we travelled, we looked at different things, and spirituality sort of came to the fore because it was not really something we'd experienced in our Western culture upbringing. And I always thought, there must be a little bit more work, buy, consume, die, but there must be something else, right? So in the West, we tend to have a culture that makes a lot of sense on many levels. And there's just an aspect that's missing. And you can see other cultures around the world have a little bit more of a spiritual culture or an understanding of something beyond just, birth, death, work, buy, consume, die. So we went on a bit of an experiment. But when we access the spiritual self, I thought we need to start with, well, what does that actually mean? Because the word spiritual really gets bandied around a lot. And I know in my work as a behavioural health consultant, we work from what's called the FAR model, so it's the different aspects of holistic well-being. And one of those aspects is spiritual. So, how do we define spiritual? So people will say, well, you can connect with nature, or you might have some faith in God, depending on your religion, or you might just, I don't know, what are some other aspects when we think spiritual? How would we define spiritual? I like people to kind of join in and help me with this. So think of some things. What's defined spiritual? Any ideas?
There's something bigger than yourself.
Something bigger than yourself. Thank you. Any other ideas?
Multidimensional.
Sorry?
Multidimensional.
Multidimensional. Thank you. And
presence in the moment.
Presence in the moment. Nice. Okay, so presence in the moment, multidimensional, something larger than ourselves. How often in our life do we get the opportunity to think about the multidimensionality of existence, or being in the moment, or something larger than ourselves? Put up your hand if you spend 5 minutes a day thinking about one of those concepts, or being in the moment. Yeah, cool. All right, we've got a few spiritual aspirants. Okay, so what defines material? Give me some ideas of, because if we're going to define what is spiritual, so we're going to access our spiritual self, we need to understand the difference between material and spiritual. So what's material? Any ideas?
Something you can touch and feel.
What's that, sorry?
Something physical you can touch.
Something physical you can touch, right? So, yeah, I can touch this book, I can touch this here, I'm touching the floor right now. Anything else? Material.
One dimensional.
One dimensional.
Well, can't cross the one dimensions. And yeah.
Okay, so it's something tangible and just kind of solid. Yeah? Yeah, any other ideas? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? We've got this kind of yearning, there's something spiritual about us, there's something going on, but I'm not quite sure exactly what that is. And material, yeah, we might think in quite concrete terms. So, yeah, like if we touch our shoulder, is that material? Yeah. Okay. So who is it that's touching the shoulder? So the hands touching the shoulder. Everybody touch your shoulder. Yep. All right. So you can feel that, right? Feel your hands, you can feel where you're touching, so you've got a sense of touch. Now, what is it that directed our hand to touch our shoulder? Apart from me saying it, what is it that directed that hand to make it to our shoulder?
Consciousness.
Consciousness? Yeah, there's some kind of observer, right? There's something that's, we can say the brain, and there's different functions, and it all happens so instantaneously, we just do it. All right. So I was thinking, on this topic in terms of accessing our spiritual self, and it's quite a personal journey, because the last few weeks I've had a really interesting journey. And I think a lot of us have had a really interesting journey, in the last few months or years, or, maybe our whole lifetime. But sometimes there's things that happen in life that kind of make us go, wait a minute, what's my consciousness and what am I doing, and why does life throw these storms my way? So whether it's an internal emotional storm, whether it's things that happen to us externally, whether it's something that's, you know, happening in a relationship, you know, there's kind of storms that come through our life. So my particular storm was we had a very heavy rainfall. And I woke up early in the morning, because I'd like to get up and, you know, try out my meditation in the morning. And I put my foot out of bed and it went into water up to my ankle. And that was a really weird feeling because it's not kind of what you expect. So, you know, there I am in the dark, foot in the water, you know, just waking up. So there was this connection, what's going on here? And then I realized, oh, the house is flooded. And the electricity had gone off. Anyway, so that was phase one. Okay, so that was something that was unexpected. So then within, gosh, I think 36 hours, we had a big storm. And I was out checking the cows to just make sure they're okay, because I was sitting in my office, you know, I'm doing home office at the moment because I work in a hospital and they like us to try and keep healthy. And so I've been doing all my consults on the phone. So I'm sitting in my home office and suddenly I see this waterfall outside my home office window where there's not usually water. And suddenly there's this waterfall going past and it's coming down a bank and down the road and then right in front of the cabin. I thought, oh, this is good. So I went to check the cows that they were all in a dry space. Coming back, simultaneous thunder and lightning right in front of me, just boom. And I was like, whoa, it's not quite what I expected. And then I turn around and this earth starts moving next to me. Trees are on their way down and there's a whole landslide coming down my way. I was like, wow. That's not really what I expected. You know, I'm sitting in home office doing my calls, so, you know, some rain, step. Anyway, so I thought, okay, this probably isn't a very safe place to be. So off I went, back home, and my house is flooded again. So I walk in and everything's floating, you know. So I was kind of standing there like, wow, you know, well, life can really throw some interesting things our way. So it really made me reflect on, well, what's my response to that, and why am I surprised that material world can throw storms our way? And I was having some conversations with some clients that I was talking to, because they've been having some internal emotional storms. And so we were kind of talking about this concept of, you know, if you're out at sea, and has anyone been out on a boat out in the ocean before? And you know, when it's a lovely fine day and it's really beautiful and the water's just lapping and you're really relaxed, and then a wind comes and big waves come and there's rain coming down, and the intensity of being on a boat in a storm like that. Has anyone ever experienced it? Yeah. So in those situations, you really want an anchor. You want something to help you manage the storm. So somebody talking about being in the moment, being present in the moment. And when we're in these situations, you find it's a bit of a test to how actually resilient we are, or how much of an anchor we can put in place at that time. And different things stress different people. So it might be a physical storm, it might be some words that somebody says, it might be, you know, your response to the virus and the impact, you know, things that the government's done to respond to the virus. You know, it could be lots of different things that affect us differently. But this idea of an anchor really brought me to this verse that's in the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm just going to read it out because it's quite a nice one. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So, you know, that's quite a hard thing, tolerating something without being disturbed. So that might sound okay philosophically. I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. And when a storm comes again, how tolerant are we going to be? So there's this idea of anchoring, there's this idea that I've talked about accessing the spiritual self as very important. So in order to access that spiritual self, we need some knowledge about what that is. Otherwise, when these storms come through, we can get so caught up with the weather. We can get so caught up with the mind. We can get so caught up with others' perceptions of us. We can get affected by whatever that storm may be for us in quite a profound way. But to actually be undisturbed, this is spiritual. But how to access the spiritual self? What is our methodology? Because it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing to do it. So the first step in self-realization, or the first step in accessing the spiritual self, is to know matter, spirit, and the controller of both. So this is step one in our spiritual quest. We need to differentiate between matter and spirit, and we need to understand the controller of both. Because the fact that there is matter and that there is spirit indicates there's a source of both of those things. And has anybody here read this Bhagavad Gita before? Or seen it, come across it? Definitely recommend it in terms of it's an amazing sort of roadmap to understanding the predicament that we're in, and to help us seek, understand, and experience genuine spiritual knowledge. So it explains that matter it's inert stuff, and something with matter which is really interesting is our bodies, our physical bodies that we're sitting in here now, are composed of matter. But what is the difference between me and this container that this plant's in? Is there any verifiable, can you observe any difference between me and that? What's some of the differences?
Organic.
Organic? Plastic? Really?
If you want organic.
Ah. Okay, yep, yep. Any other differences?
You're alive.
I'm alive? Yep. So I'm talking, I'm consciousness. So when the consciousness, when the spiritual self is in the body, it gives life. So if I leave my body right now, here, I'm not going to be alive. I'm not going to be conscious. I'm not going to be interacting, and I'm not going to continue growing older. So it stops. So the soul, the spirit soul, is within matter, which animates it, gives it consciousness. So the symptom of the soul is consciousness. So is this a real plant or a fake plant?
It's real.
It's real, okay. So what's the difference between this plant and this planter?
Vibrations.
Vibrations?
Well, energy.
Energy?
Yeah.
So it gives off a bit of energy than this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like an organism has an internal energy and operates in itself.
Yeah. What else can we tell about the plant that separates it from the container it's in? It grows. Well, we hope so, if it's healthy. And it will show if it's not healthy. See, it's got these marks. So matter, spirit gives matter life, it gives it growth. But there's a difference between me and the plant. What's the difference? Different level of consciousness. So what's the symptom of that? I can talk, yeah. But I mean, plants can talk, right? They probably can talk with each other. We just can't necessarily understand their language. But so what the difference between matter and spirit is that when the spirit is present, things grow. They have life. So whether that's a fish in the sea, or a cow in our paddock, or a tree next to me, or me here. So the symptom of the soul is life, and that helps you differentiate between matter and spirit. about the controller of both? So to understand, to be able to differentiate between what's material and what's spiritual, we need knowledge from the controller of both. I guess, like, have we got any electricians here? Anyone that knows much about electricity or a little bit about electricity? Yeah?
I do engineering.
Engineering?
Yeah, so
Cool. So an engineer is going to have a bit more of an understanding of what goes into, behind things. So we can see that the light is on, which means it's connected to a source of energy. So has anyone experienced when the power goes out? So it's quite a different experience when the power's on. So we understand that the energy comes from somewhere to be able to turn the light on. Now we can have a basic understanding. We can be like a little child that, the light's not going on. Why not? Naughty light. So we can, get caught up with thinking the power is coming from the light. Or as we, get older and learn more knowledge about something, we understand there's an energetic source for that light. It comes from a power station that's generated through water or the sun or wherever it is the power comes from. So similarly, to truly understand the difference between matter and spirit, we need to have knowledge of the source of both. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita teaches us, is to understand. So we have a philosophical understanding of getting knowledge of the difference between matter and spirit and the source of both. And then we have a methodology, because to access the spiritual self, if we are spiritual by nature, why is it we can't access that part of ourselves anywhere in any situation? Anybody have any ideas? Why can't we just be spiritual all the time? Why can't we access that spiritual part of ourselves? Even if we philosophically understand, yes, we're spiritual by nature. So what gets in the way? Any ideas?
experience.
Experience? What is it we're experiencing?
I don't know, I mean, like, someone teaches how to ride a bike, doesn't mean you can necessarily ride a bike. At least actually do it.
Okay, yep. So there's a methodology to experience spirit. Anything else? What else gets in the way? Yep.
The thinking mind.
The mind?
Yeah, the mental shadow.
Beautiful. Yep. The mind. So we understand through being present in the moment. Who's practiced a bit of mindfulness meditation before? Put your hands up. Yeah. So part of that meditation is centering ourselves in our senses, right? Our sensual experience, what we hear, what we smell, what we feel. Like really just centering yourself, your senses. So we've got 5 senses. So seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, hearing. Did I say that? Yeah. So the Bhagavad Gita explains a little further that the 6th sense is the mind. So the mind is helping us experience, spirit soul experience matter through our senses. But it's explained that higher than the mind is the intelligence, and the intelligence sits next to the soul. So the soul, by developing good intelligence, can direct the mind, can direct the senses to actually access our spiritual nature. When we don't have that access, when we don't have the methodology, when we don't have the knowledge, we get very caught up with the mind. And we all know what a mind's like, right? It's explained in Bhagavad Gita that one can deliver oneself with the help of the mind or degrade oneself with the help of the mind. So the mind is a very powerful tool. And I spend probably about 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, working with people with their minds. And the most challenging part for people is because it's that inner experience. So life can throw things at us, but how we respond to what life throws at us comes down to how our minds are. And we hear a lot about, mental health. What is good mental health? So any ideas? What is good mental health? Some ideas from you guys. Does everyone have, yeah?
Positive thinking.
Positive thinking, right? Yep. So the cup half full, cup half empty, how it is that we approach things. Yep.
Happiness.
Happiness. Yep. What about this verse that says happiness and distress, we can still be spiritual? So that's what the mind likes. It likes happiness. But what the mind does is, because it's a bit of a busybody, and it's explained through psychology and biology in terms of understanding the nature of the human brain, is that the mind is a problem-seeking tool, a problem-solving tool. So it's always going into problem-solving. So even when we are happy, it can't be there with us for long, because it'll go into, how do I stay happy? Or how do I keep this going? Or what if things don't work out the way that I want them to? So it's very difficult for us to be there in the moment, because the mind's thinking, it's going into this problem-solving mode. And when we identify with the mind, when we hook in with the mind, it takes us everywhere except the moment. Anyone experience that? Good old mind. And you know, sometimes it's literally just understanding that's the nature of the mind, that's its job. And it takes a bit of bridling and a bit of work to engage the mind and the intelligence, and to engage the mind in benefiting the spirit's soul. But there is a methodology to do that, so don't lose hope. There is a way to do that. And I thought, in terms of, you know, time and utilising the best information within a short amount of time, because I think there's 3 points we need to understand. We need to understand what is matter, what is spirit, what is the controller of both. And then we need tools to access the spiritual self in any moment. And this can be done. So a very, very powerful tool, which we're going to all do together right now, is to chant the holy names of Krishna. So there's many names of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Krishna means the all-attractive reservoir of pleasure. And we can approach the Supreme, the source of material and spiritual worlds, the source of matter and spirit, in a meditative way. And by this process, it's said to cleanse the intelligence, cleanse the mind, and help us access the spiritual nature, which is us, sitting within this body, with the body, the senses, the mind. We're like directing this. Oh, okay. Has anybody seen a horse and cart before? Has anyone driven a horse and cart? Yeah? So I've got a few nods there. So when you've got the horse and cart, you've got the cart, you've got the passenger in the back. I remember I actually got to drive the DB Clydesdale or something years ago. It was like 8 Clydesdales, like they're big horses, right? And I think I was maybe 15 or 16, a little thing. And you can control these big horses because you've got the reins, and you pull on the reins. So it's explained that when you've got control of the reins, and you've got the, say it's 6 horses pulling it. So each horse represents one of the senses. So the sense of taste, sense of smell, sense of hearing, the mind. So when the driver's got control of the reins, you can direct the horse and cart to where you want to go. So if you've got a destination that you want to go to, and you've got the reins, you've got control of the horses, you've got control of the senses, then you can remain steady in your journey. Does that make sense? So what happens when we don't have the reins? And you've got the 6 horses, very powerful, and they're unbridled, and you're sitting in the carriage. It's a bit of a scary ride. So this is said to be when we don't have high spiritual knowledge, when we don't control our mind and senses, when we don't understand the destination of where we're wanting to direct our life, that's when we get these internal storms, or the mind becomes very, very disruptive, very, very strong, and it's very hard to unhook from the mind, because these horses, this chariot is just going wherever it wants to go. So accessing the spiritual self means understanding the nature of ourself, the different aspects of ourself, and harnessing our direction with knowledge of the soul, and with knowledge of the Supreme Soul, the source of everything. So with all that happening, we can remain, you know, focused. So coming back to, you know, the methodology. So when I had this experience with the house flooding, what are some things I could do? Anybody experienced a house flood before? Yeah. So what do you do in that situation?
Or you try to remove the water first to freeze.
So you go into problem solving. Yep. Get that water out of there. What if it's just coming in and just that's too much? So yeah, it's just overwhelming, right? Yeah. So we can go into problem solving the situation, and that's generally how we handle stress. Yes.
We dunk your head on the water and just like just accept it. And then decision making.
Right, I'm going under. Yeah. Any other ideas? Anyone else experienced a flood in your house? Has anybody experienced an emotional storm, an internal storm? Hands up. Yeah. It's part of our human experience. But a genuine anchor is to connect in that moment with the fact that it's a temporary situation. A storm is a temporary situation. You need to find your anchor within that storm. Don't let yourself get blown off course. Come back to the moment. Come back to understanding who you are and connecting with the Supreme Being in that moment. And that is so powerful. That is accessing your spiritual self in the moment. And as a genuine yogi or a genuine aspirant of spiritual life, somebody who's a more advanced practitioner, they're in that consciousness at every moment. It doesn't change. But for many of us as beginners on the spiritual path, we're trying to increase those moments of connection. We're trying to increase the consciousness of who we are and who the source of ourselves is. And that connection, that relationship, that is what generates us to get to the state where happiness, distress, honor, dishonor, summer, winter, we can transcend these things. We don't get so caught up in the experience of that storm. We can understand how to anchor ourselves, how to be connected, to understand the impermanence of material reality. That creates very good mental health. And mental health professionals around the world are understanding this, so that's why they have this thing now called acceptance and commitment therapy. Well, now they have focused acceptance and commitment therapy. It's understanding from cultures all around the world that have known it for generations or hundreds of years, centuries, that actually we are transcendent to just our material reality. There is something in us that transcends a material experience. And without accessing that part of ourselves, we get so blown off course and so caught up in something which is will pass. This will pass. So how to do that in the moment without being too difficult about it, as I said, is coming back to this chanting, this meditation. And the amazing thing about chanting this mantra, so it's the Maha mantra, like the great mantra. Man means mind, Chat means to free. So a great way to unhook from your mind, to free yourself from your mind in those storms, is to take shelter in this mantra that directly connects us to the spirit soul, directly connects us to the spiritual energy. And the proof is in the pudding. Like, give it a try. But the thing with the mantra is that it uses our tongue, we say it, we use our ears, we hear it, we can chant on beads, and then we can chant on beads, then you feel it, so you're engaging all your senses in the moment. So it's a very useful tool, even for our own daily health, but it's also a very potent spiritual way of accessing our spiritual self. So let's all try. We'll use our fingers because we don't have beads here. Oh yeah, can I demonstrate that? Thank you. So I think they have beads here, or you don't need to have beads, like, I'm sitting at work, I don't usually have beads on me. but you can practice and access this mantra anywhere in any situation. So you can use beads, or you can use your fingers, or you can just close your eyes and even say this mantra internally if that helps you focus, or if you're in a situation where you feel you can't chant out loud. But let's try it. Let's close our eyes. Oh, sorry, might need to, some of us might need to read it. So for those of us that know the mantra, you can close your eyes. For those of us that don't, you can read it up there, and we're going to say each name really clearly and carefully, and I want you to absorb yourself in hearing the sound. That's all. Your mind might come here, your mind might go there. Doesn't matter. Just come back to hearing that sound. So I want you to experience it for yourselves. All right. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare. It's wonderful, isn't it? You just want to keep going. So that is a very powerful, potent way of accessing your spiritual self in any situation. There is so much potency and strength in that experience. And that's what I said I'll talk about tonight, accessing the spiritual self. So there's a methodology. As I said, those three aspects. I want you to learn more about matter, learn about spirit, and learn about the source of both, because that is what constitutes genuine knowledge and helpful knowledge in our path, in our spiritual path. So any questions or comments or challenges? Yes.
So what can you expect from accessing that self? Because like we just said that mantra 3 times, it didn't feel much different at the end of the beginning.
Yeah.
So what from?
Well, in the moment, you're accessing your transcendent self. So if you practice that at any moment you can center yourself in the moment and connect with something larger than yourself. So there's a lot of philosophy and knowledge that goes along with it. It's sometimes just worth an actual, experience of it. But to get more knowledge of the spirit and of matter and of the source of both will help you understand that mantra more and more. But to start with, it is a mantra that anybody, anywhere, any age, any culture can try out to connect with the spiritual self. Does that make sense? So you want to add a bit more to that? So it's it takes some practice, and it doesn't, because it's open for everybody. So there's other ways that we can ground ourselves in the moment, in terms of that anchor experience that I talked about, but this is a very, very powerful way that sages and great personalities have tried out for many years. Anything else? All right, well, thank you so much. And